in the cloud. I'm going to share my screen. All right, can everybody see this? Oh, nope, I haven't shared it. Hold on, sorry. I've got way too many tabs open, as I've been reminded. All right, how's that looking? Can somebody give me a thumbs up? All right, thank you, Jesse, appreciate it. All right, well, welcome everybody to Creative Minds. Again, don't raise your hand. Please put any questions into the chat. If you put them in the chat, we can see them. I can't see anything though while I'm presenting, but we have 2 people monitoring the chat for us. And that way, everybody will hear your questions. So welcome to our virtual open house. Obviously, this is an accommodation we're doing for the current state of affairs we're all in, but I do feel very optimistic. We're moving away from having to be virtual. So we're really excited about being able to do this in person sometime soon. But for now, let's do this and answer whatever questions you have. So appreciate you all making some time on a Saturday, especially a beautiful Saturday like today. So we'll try to be efficient and get you guys outside so you can enjoy the nice weather. So this is slide number 2. I always like to start with the Creative Minds mission. When I joined 3 years ago, we went through a strategic planning process to really try to focus the school. The school was going into its 8th year. It had some changes, some turnover, and it used to have a mission statement that was like a full page of text. Hard to remember, hard to understand. It tried to be everything to everybody. When I think sometimes less is more. So the board worked together with our community, with our families, with our staff, and we came up with this beautiful, concise mission statement. To cultivate within all, and we capitalize all for very important reasons, of our students, the mindset, creativity, mindset, skills, creativity, and commitment to equity essential in becoming globally aware and independently minded citizens. What you notice isn't in here, doesn't tell you what we teach every single day and all that kind of stuff. That's why I have all my directors here today, so they can fill you in on what that is. And it's really better to understand what we're going to have at the end of this process with your child versus talking about all the how in a mission statement. So that's the rationale behind it. Our lower school. So we are a pre-K 3 through 8th grade school. That's 11 grade bands, all in one building. We start at pre-K 3, and we have pre-K 3, 4, kinder, and 1st grade, all in one school. We're kind of a school within a school model, and one of the reasons we've done that is it creates really strong horizontal alignment along appropriate childhood development milestones. All right, and the really cool thing is our curriculum matches these divisions pretty much. So you learn different things, you learn differently in pre-K 3 through 1st grade than you do in 2nd through 4th grade than you do in middle school. And each one of these schools has its own director. We also have some vertically aligned directors who cover our inclusion programming, our full overall academic programming, myself, our operations. So, but really, I just wanted to talk real briefly about this. Pre-K 3 through 1st grade, there's 12 classrooms. Each kindergarten or pre-K class is both pre-K 3 and pre-K 4 students intermingled. And Jesse, who's our director, and Nyamka will be able to answer those questions. Nyamka Long is our chief academic officer. 2nd through 4th grade, we have 9 classes. And then middle school, 5th through 8th, we have 8 homeroom classes. So the total number of all students in all grades this year is 548, which is exactly what we hoped for and what we were projected to have. Each class has a teacher and at least a teaching assistant in it. Many have a teacher and an inclusion teacher, or they might have a teacher, teaching assistant, dedicated aide. They might have someone coming in providing some services. We try to keep our class sizes really small, but with a good adult presence, so kids' needs can be addressed at that time. Our maximum class size is 21 students, and our basic student to teacher ratio is 10 to 1, but if you actually include all the other staff in that, it's much closer to like 5 to 1, 6 to 1. We have a lot of adults in this building who care deeply about your kiddos. Our approach is a student-centered approach. In fact, every decision we make, we think about, is this the right thing? Is this good for kids? If we can't trace it back to that, it doesn't matter if we're deciding what the operations are, what color the walls are, who the cleaning company is. We always trace it back to the student to make sure that's what we focus on. We focus on the whole child. That's not just academics, right? That's a very important part of being a child and learning and growing and all that, but also socio-emotional development, having fun with your friends. You'll hear about the fact that we have 2 recesses in lower school. Unlike many other schools that just have 1 recess. We do a lot of art, we do music, we learn languages. Our goal is to create holistic human beings who are excited about being a human being and excited about taking care of their community. One of the ways that we do this, and you're going to hear in more detail about our international curriculum. We are the only school in the United States accredited to use this curriculum. It's out of London and it's used in many, 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 many private schools all over the world. But as the only public school in the United States that gets to use it, it's pretty exciting. And we picked it, and Iamka can speak about why we picked it a little bit later, but it has that holistic approach. It has a really smart cyclical approach to learning. But it also has, and these are one of the things that we really love too, is we have personal goals for each and every month. All 11 grade bands talk about these goals at the same time. So, and our goals for this year are we are adaptable, we are communicators, we are collaborators, excuse me, Saturday morning. We are empathetic, we are thinkers, we are resilient, and we are respectful. So those of you who are new, or even some of our returning parents, will probably notice when your child comes home, they'll say something like, I was adaptable today because it was raining outside, we couldn't do outdoor recess, so I adapted. And that's coming from a 3-year-old. So I think you're going to find it's really interesting, and it is something that is a common thread throughout our whole school. The other thing we talk a lot about here is community and how to nurture our community. So a lot of that is getting kids out in front of each other to present. Not always the teacher's talking, not always, there's very little direct instruction. There's a lot of small group work. We also do community meetings a lot. So in the lower school, every student, every grade has 2 community meetings up every month. And those are things like, we've been talking about Black History Month this month, obviously. We'll talk about the personal goals. They'll talk about what they're learning. Middle school has community meetings once a month. And then you're going to hear about our exit points. These are really celebrations of learning. Those happen at the community meetings as well. It's like, what did you learn today? Show it to us. And it really empowers our students, gives them a lot of self-efficacy skills. It is truly a celebration. You see Mr. Garwin there, our art teacher, who is not really 12 feet tall, but he was for one of these community meetings. And then in the middle school, we run advisories. Those are socio-emotional lessons. Middle school is a tough time of transition for everybody. All of the parents here survived it, obviously, but it's a really good thing for students to be able to talk about that, to have some directed learning and discussions around that. And again, you can hear more about that when you hear about our middle school. And with that, I'm going to turn it over to our amazing Director of Inclusion. I'd ask you, Emmanuel, to introduce yourself and then talk a little bit about inclusion here at Creative Minds. Also, to the following presenters, can you please tell me when to go to the next slide so I keep up with you? Thanks, appreciate it.
Thank you so much. Good morning, everyone. I'm Dr. Emmanuel Taiwo, and I'm the Director of Inclusion at CMI. We have a great inclusion program. We believe in inclusion, and that's what we do. So when we have students with IEPs join the school, within the first 30 days or 60 days, depending on the nature of the IEP, we meet with the families to review the IEP and revise and update it to meet the needs of the child. So we do that within the first 1 to 2 months. Then we bring all the service providers together, our occupational therapists, our speech pathologists. I'm going to talk about that later on, and the teachers, to really understand the needs and the strengths of the child and develop an IEP based on those strengths and need. We meet with the family on a regular basis, at least once in a year, to revise the IEP. And if there are reasons to meet more than one time, that happens. For example, sometimes we have the need to amend an IEP, so we still meet the family to do that. Next slide, please. So our inclusion team is a multidisciplinary team. I'm the head of the team. We have 2 coordinators for special education, one for lower school and one for middle school. We have 14 inclusion teachers working with all students, and we have 18 dedicated aides. Sometimes students will require this one-on-one support based on the needs that the IEP team identify. So we have dedicated aid working with students to help them navigate the school day. We have 7 service providers. And I'm going to be talking about that in the next slide. Please, can you go to, yeah, thank you. So in-house, we have 2 occupational therapists, one for middle school and another one for lower school. We have 2 speech pathologists and 3 social workers and counselors working with our students. We also have external related service providers working with our students. We have an audiologist, we have ET specialists working with students with extreme or extreme communication needs. So we have devices that students use, and we conduct the evaluation to determine what will be best for them and what kind of support they need. We also have a physical therapist that come to the building to work with our students. Currently, we have 15 students receiving physical therapy support in the building. So we look forward to working with your child if your child has an IEP of 504, and we'll do everything we can to collaborate with you and to make sure that your child is included in all aspects of our school life. Thank you.
Thanks, Manuel. I just wanted to highlight the very last thing you said. As an inclusion school, we are a school where our kids are presumed, all of our kids are presumed to be in the classes at all times. Yes, they'll get pulled out for services if the services need to be rendered outside of the classroom, but our goal is really not even push in, they're in, and we rarely pull them out. And that's kind of the difference between an inclusion focused school and a more traditional school. More traditional school is going to separate kids who have special needs oftentimes. And our belief, and I love Emmanuel, he always leads with strength, what the students' strengths are. And so that's our approach to things. So I just wanted to share that because it really is, it's the reason I came here to work.
Hi, my name is Heather Hesslink. I'm the Director of Operations and Compliance. Although I serve many logistical roles, the one I'm going to talk to you about now is regarding the facilities and our health and safety. We have very robust and forward-thinking measures regarding health and safety. For example, at our school, we have a CLIA waiver, which allows us to do in-school testing. So our in-school testing actually consists of asymptomatic testing. We also have symptomatic testing for students who exhibit COVID-like symptoms at school. And then we have a test to stay program. So anybody who is a close contact can participate in test to stay and come to school. We are one of the first schools in the city to have a functioning and operating test to stay program. So it's been great. One of the reasons why we worked hard to have a robust system was in order to provide equity to all students. This way, we can try to keep all students in school as much as possible. In addition, we want to make sure that regardless of where students come from, they have access to testing. And so that's why we really worked hard to get our testing program up and running. In addition to testing, we've been focusing and highly encouraging families that are eligible to have their child vaccinated. We've been working very hard to reduce any sort of obstacles or barriers to access to anything. I believe as the Director of Operations that one of my goals is to support everyone in the community to help them reduce barriers and access to opportunities to be successful. With regard to vaccinations, we've actually hosted multiple vaccination clinics at the school. We are currently scheduled to host another vaccination clinic at the school that will be offering vaccines for anyone who's eligible to receive them next Friday. And until yesterday, we actually had a vaccination clinic for children under the age of 5 set up for March, the middle of March, thinking that the CDC was going to approve it. I am now working to ship that to the middle of May. Also with that clinic, assuming the CDC authorizes a booster for children 5 to 11 in general, we will set it up because that'll be roughly the 5-month point for when we hosted our first sets of clinics for students to get the vaccine, really trying to make sure that we're keeping people healthy, safe, and learning. With that, if you'd like to go to the next slide. In addition to testing, we actually have a robust program to ensure that everyone is safe, they are comfortable and that they're able to learn in the building. So in addition to screening and vaccinations, we have a daily health screening that we ask everyone to do upon arrival. It's just an app you download on your phone. You answer a series of questions and it lets you know if your child is feeling well enough to come to school or not, just based on the color of the screen. Currently, we have different measures in place to ensure health and safety and to mitigate the spread of COVID within the building. We do social distancing, we do cohort, we require masking as per DC protocols. We also have a rigorous cleaning protocol and cleaning standards. Our standards were extremely rigorous and other schools use our model when procuring the contract, just because we have multiple pages of daily expectations and we have an accountability system in place to verify that they're being met every day. Currently, as part of our COVID protocols, once a week on Friday, we have the building electrostatically sprayed, which pretty much kills anything that lives in the air, whether it's the COVID virus, norovirus, the flu, strep throat, other things that we do. Again, we have very high daily standards and we have checklists that get filled out. So this way there's not just high standards, but there's also accountability to make sure the work is getting done. And the other thing that we've done in the building to improve health and safety is we have installed HEPA UVC air filters in every classroom, and we change them and we monitor them on a regular basis. So not only do we say we're going to do these things on paper, we actually execute these things on a daily basis. With that, that is the end of the health and safety, and I'd like to turn it over to the Chief Academic Officer, and I am Phil Wan.
Hi, good morning. Thank you, Heather. I am going to, as Heather said, I'm the Chief Academic Officer here at Creative Minds, and I'm going to introduce to you and share with you a little bit about our international curriculum. It's known as Fieldwork, and the great thing about it is that it encompasses all the grade levels that we have here and builds upon where students start in preschool and then moves them through kindergarten through fourth and then through our middle school program. So it starts with the international early years curriculum, moves through international primary curriculum, and then into the international middle years. And with this curriculum, it's thematic based. And what that means is that the units of learning that students are approaching is that it's around this one theme, and all the learning is connected through that. RAIN research shows that when those connections are made for student, the more likely they'll remember and be able to make further connections beyond that. Next slide, please. This picture here demonstrates the circle of learning that occurs with each and every unit. And so with that, students become familiar with how they're going to be learning. Each unit starts with an entry point, which really gets students excited about what they're going to be learning about. And also, a way to kind of hook students in with their learning. It next moves to a knowledge harvest, and that's an opportunity for students, for the teachers to know what students already know about that topic, because we want it to be fun and engaging. And if it's something that students already know, like, we're not going to focus our attention on that. We want to continue to develop their knowledge. And so we want to kind of build on what they already know and introduce them with other concepts. From there, it kind of moves to explaining the theme. So the teacher gets information about what they already know. They read about, what the learning goals are for this, and kind of develop and share with students what they're going to be learning during this time. When they're explaining the theme, it next moves to research reflect. And that's where students are kind of have these multiple opportunities to learn about things, to reflect on it, and then kind of review. And so that cycle just continues multiple times throughout the unit. And then it ends with an exit point, and that's really the culmination of learning that has occurred with the unit. And it's a fun opportunity for students to kind of see the path that they've taken when they started the unit, and then all the learning that they have accumulated throughout the unit. And just having this regular cycle happen with each learning, students know what to expect during this time, and it also creates a nice way to kind of reflect on the year to see all the learning that has occurred. Next slide, please. Here, as you see, it goes continuous, and although pieces of it are slightly different, with middle school, it kind of goes a little bit more in depth with the research pieces, and students are able to do some of that on their own, whereas in the international early years and the IPC, that's a little bit more teacher directed, but as they get into middle school, we really want them to hone those skills of doing research, because we know that's a quality skill that they're going to need as they move throughout their education. And there's just 2 examples of the units that they do in middle school. So you see balance and risk, and those are really tied to the brain research that shows around like where students' brains are at this level. And like the risk, we want to make sure that they're taking safe risk and balance. And so those are some of the units that they explore in middle school. Next slide, please. We are excited to have global languages at our school. We are by no means a bilingual school. Our approach with global languages is we want to introduce and provide Mandarin and Spanish not only language, but also culture to all of our students. So starting in preschool 3 all the way through 8th grade, students have access to learning a language. And what we do, next slide, please. And here you'll see in our preschool through 4th grade, students take Spanish and Mandarin. They take each of those classes 1 day a week. Once students move to middle school, we have them choose a language because we want them to move more towards mastery. So they have those classes 4 days a week. So for example, a student in 5th grade, they chose to take Spanish. They'll have Spanish 4 days a week. I just want to highlight that, throughout preschool through that 8th grade time, not only are they learning the language, but they're also learning about the culture, which we also think is important, kind of providing that holistic approach. All right, and next slide, I'm going to turn it over to our elementary directors.
Good morning, everyone. My name is Tsitsi Sitole. I'm the new Early Childhood Director 3 weeks in, and it's wonderful to be part of this wonderful team. I'm going to speak a little bit about technology and then hand it to the other directors. So in pre-kindergarten, there are no school-issued devices. We really limit the screen time. So teachers could sometimes use the screen for maybe reading books, for research purposes, and movement breaks. And when the students move to kindergarten and 1st grade, we issue iPads and Chromebooks. They remain at school. And again, they're used for math games or for movement breaks. And I'll hand it over to Jessie.
Good morning, everyone. My name is Jessie Curry, and I'm the elementary director for 2nd through 4th grade. So kind of moving into 2nd grade band, we're continuing to have iPads or Chromebooks that we're using at school and really able to utilize the technology as kind of a support for learning. So students may be developing math concepts using ST Math or working on their fluency in other ways, or using it to read books. And then moving into 3rd and 4th, we're able to have not only devices at school for students, but also a device for home. And they're really using these tablets and computers and tech more for research. So especially in relation with the international curriculum that Nyamka was sharing about, being able to research like landforms, for example, in 4th grade, as they're working on making some presentation boards, as well as using some of the other programs to support learning as well. And I'll pass to Lorna for middle school.
Good morning, everyone. My name is Lorna Dale, and I'm the director of middle school. And so our 5th through 8th graders have a school issued device or tablet at home, and then we have an additional device for them to take to use at school. During the school-based lessons, students use the laptops for research, for writing, for math and literacy. We pride ourselves in having students do presentations. So the device at home is used to connect to their school email, where they can get on Google Classroom and continue the research, continue their writing, and just make sure that there's a home to school connection that gives them continuity to continue their lessons from home to school. And next slide.
Hey guys, this is Jen here interrupting, longtime listener, first time caller. We just had a question come in about technology. It says, what privacy protections do students have on their devices? Do they have Google accounts holding their personal information and their schoolwork?
Yes, so we use a platform called Clever, where all of the information, where like for the math games and the Google Classroom and Seesaw, all that is linked through this Clever account where we're able to kind of monitor what students are using. We also have a Go Guardian account, which flags us for if there's inappropriate things, searches that students are doing. Our directors are flagged to those, any of those kind of inappropriate searches. I'll keep going with the next slide. And I just want to kind of read this out because this encompasses well how we approach arts integration in our school. Arts integration taps into students' visual, kinesthetic, auditory strengths, engaging them more deeply in the learning. We really see the arts as an opportunity to do that. A lot of schools, I think, we see the value in having arts and music. And what we do is we have students take art classes for one semester. So this year, our middle school students started taking art classes, and our lower school students took music class, and then they alternate. So now they've switched. So for half of the year, they're able to engage in art or music. Next slide, please. We wanted to kind of give a little bit more information. We talked about our teacher-staff ratio, and it's fantastic that we're able to have that ratio because it creates great opportunities for us to build on where students are. We're able to provide small groups in the classroom. Teachers are able to create these small groups based on data that they have collected from assessments. We use this to kind of build on students' skills that they're missing, but then also kind of use that to kind of figure out what they need to learn next. Teachers meet with multiple groups, small groups in a day. The great thing about this is that these groups are fluid in that a student may be in a different group for reading than they are in math. And also those groups change because if a student already has that knowledge, we kind of move them into different groups. So it's really nice to have those kind of fluid groups to really meet the needs of the students. In our middle school program, we are able to offer geometry to those students who have, proven that they have mastered the skills up through 8th grade math, and we provide opportunities for them to take those algebra classes. Next slide, please. We have a very robust student wellness team. Previously, Dr. Emmanuel Taiwo spoke about all of the service providers that we have. In addition to those service providers, we also have school counselors and school social workers. And some of the things that they work on, they provide behavior support, short-term counseling, mental health support. They also help with students as they transition to middle school, any referrals that they receive for support, and then also homelessness services. So if a family does find themselves homeless, we offer support to be able to help the family get connected with resources. Next slide, please. And conscious discipline is our approach to interacting with students. I want to highlight it as evidence-based, trauma-informed approach to social emotional development. As we have been navigating a pandemic, I think this has become abundantly appropriate for us to really take this into account, social emotional development. And conscious discipline really grounds itself on relationship building and the importance of that and able to support the students in our community. We work to set and achieve goals together. We manage in emotions instead of acting out. We help students set kind of boundaries to encourage mutual respect, kind of going back to our personal goals. And we work to resolve conflicts in a way that, create opportunities for us to engage and kind of move closer with those relationships. Next slide, please. And I'm going to turn it over to our elementary director.
So we can talk a little bit about our kind of schedule for the school day. So on Mondays, Tuesdays, Thursdays, and Fridays, I believe previously we had before school care that I don't believe offered right now due to the pandemic, but drop off and breakfast at 8:15. Our classes start at 8:45. Pre-K through fourth grade dismisses at 3:30 and middle school dismisses at 4. And we do offer an after-school program until 6 p.m. That I believe we'll share more about a little bit later. On Wednesdays, we have a half day where pre-K through fourth grade dismisses at 12:30, middle school dismisses at 12:45. And that allows us to provide professional development for our teaching staff in the afternoons. And so during that 1 to 3:30 time, we offer what we call Wednesday enrichment for all students. And they're able to engage in some wellness activities, some project learning, especially kind of based off the personal goals that we talked about earlier with the international curriculum, as well as having some free time for recess and things like that. And so that's kind of what the school day looks like across the week.
Right. Next slide, please. And next up, we have our recess. And I think this is something that we really want to highlight. Students in preschool through fourth grade, they have 2 30-minute blocks of recess every single day. I think that really highlights how we are mindful of developmentally appropriateness for students. We know in those grades they need to be moving their bodies, and they learn best when they have opportunities to move. Once students get to 5th through 8th grade, they do have 1 30-minute block because they also need to have that opportunity to move. Right now for our meals, our preschool through 2nd graders have their meals in the classroom, and our students in 3rd through 8th grade come in the main hall to eat. When students are in the main hall, they are cohorted. We have students cohorted by grades because those are times when they have their mask off. And going back to what Heather mentioned previously, really wanting to consider the health and wellness of our community and keeping students separated when they have their mask off for eating. Breakfast is free for all students. Anyone who wants it is available to have that. We have lunch available for purchase, and we also participate in the free and reduced meal program. Next slide, please. And I'm going to turn it over to our early childhood director.
Thank you, Nayanta. Next slide, please. So in our pre-kindergarten classes, we have learning centers where children go to twice daily. The centers are where purposeful play happens, and the teachers are very intentional about considering which materials are going to be put in centers and observing what the children are doing while they're in centers. We also have enrichment classes in pre-K, so we have music, art, PE, Mandarin, and Spanish. As Nayanta mentioned before, there are 2 30-minute blocks, so children go outside in the morning and then once again for 30 minutes in the afternoon. All the classrooms have morning snack, and there is nap and quiet time every day. Nap is usually around an hour to an hour and a half. The teachers are responsive to the needs of the children in the class. And for those children who do not take a nap, they provide quiet activities, puzzles. The children can draw. If it's nice outside, a teacher will take some of the children outside. And again, as you heard mentioned, meals happen in the classroom. Breakfast and lunch happens in the classroom. Next slide, please. So as you can see, here are some children engaging in the centers. We also in kindergarten provide opportunities for play. And then teachers work with children one-on-one, again, just being very responsive to what they see and what the needs of the children in the classroom are. Next slide, please. I'm going to talk a little bit about what the days look like.
kind of in our next grade bands here, and Sitsi will pop in as needed. So they all have an international primary curriculum block. This is a really great opportunity with that curriculum to be able to integrate science and social studies, as well as math, literacy, and our personal goals. I recently got to attend an exit point for second grade for their paintings, pictures, and photographs unit that they did, where they were able to write opinion pieces about their favorite African-American artists that they'd studied, as well as creating art in the style of those artists. So I think it's a really amazing exit point, showing all the work that they had done prior to that in their IPC block. Next slide, please. We also have a literacy and math block as we cover the Common Core standards. So in both of these subjects, kind of as we shared earlier, there's a large focus on small group work, especially in our literacy block, being able to provide a fairly short lesson with students and having more opportunities for them to practice this independently. We often, in a lot of the classrooms, use a lot of stations or centers so that students are engaged in different types of literacy activities to improve their skills, where the teacher can then be meeting with individual students or small groups at the same time. And in math, having a lot of focus on developing math concepts, having a focus on learning a variety of strategies. And there's also a really great opportunity for students to kind of be leaders and share with their peers the strategies that they're using to solve problems. Next slide, please. And as was shared, we also are able to have enrichment classes. So currently, our lower school students are engaged in art, PE, Mandarin, and Spanish 4 days a week.
Next slide. So I'm going to talk to you a little bit about the day in the life of a fifth grader, and then we'll look at another typical schedule of a fifth grader on a Wednesday. So during the regular school day, classes start at 8:40, and that's after breakfast. So breakfast is served in the homerooms, and then the students prepare for their advisory, which is a social emotional learning session. Students have been learning how to regulate themselves, how to negotiate, what are some of the things that they've experienced during the pandemic and how they dealt with it. And so they use their voices to support each other, and they learn to have vocabulary along with our personal goals on how to be a community of learners, as well as use those skills outside of school. From 9:05 to 10, there's usually a content area class. In this example, it's ELA, or English Language Arts. And then the student has math. Classes are 55 minutes long. Then we balance that out with a creative arts or PE. So they either have art, music. Well, during this semester, they're in music, and then or have PE at that time. And then they move to recess and lunch. And it's flipped for the other grades. So 5, 6 has recess and then lunch, 7, 8 has lunch and then recess. Then they go to their other 2 core content areas, which is science and social studies or humanities. And then at the end of the day, they either have Mandarin or Spanish, which is a selected class of their own. Next slide, please. So on Wednesdays, as my 2 colleagues have talked about, is an early release day. It's not a half day, it's an early release day. And what we do is we use that time, and we scheduled it purposefully to have interventions during advisory. And so what we want the students to know is that they have that additional time to make up for any lessons that they might have missed earlier in the week or the previous week. And then they also have opportunities to conference with their teachers. So you might see a group of students who are should be in social studies, go to science to math, wherever they need to conference or confer with those teachers. The teachers will step in and have conferences with them, but the classes as a whole move along for the remainder of the day, only in their core content areas, and then they have lunch at the end of the day. Next slide, please. And so we're very proud of our library that we built this year. It's a very diverse and inclusive library. Students had opportunities to pick the books that they wanted in the library. We had lists. We talked to them about what they wanted to read, the types of genres. And so we created a library full of the books that the students are encouraged to read, want to read, and enjoy reading. Thank you. And next slide. And these are some of our extracurricular activities. Before the pandemic, we did have before school care and after school care. Right now, it's just after school care. We had creative clubs in after school, which consisted of sign language, baking. There was a jujitsu class, a ballet class, just some really creative classes or clubs for the students to join in on. We had, I think there was a Girl Scouts committee, Girl Scouts class. There was cheerleading, basketball. And so we tried to have activities that for all of our students to enjoy after school activities and just have fun with. Wednesday enrichments, we still try to make sure that our students have opportunities to be a part of different clubs, even though they're working on extensions for their classwork or having fun, as some of my colleagues said, having a recess or extra recess. But in middle school, we tend to look towards giving them some type of focus in enrichment so that, and it's student choice, so it's student driven. There was individual music lessons, and we're hopefully sooner than later that we can move back to this. Also in middle school, we have student council, and in our student government, we push our students to be a part of the democratic process. So there was an election, there were speeches, students voted, and then once the winners of the student council came out, we worked together. And so, for example, this week we're having a fundraiser. Students are not obligated to participate in the fundraiser, but we encourage them to participate so that the student council has leadership skills built into what they do. They have accounting skills built into what they do. And they want to make sure that the school is inclusive, making sure that everyone in the school has voice, choice, and are represented. Creative Mind boasts an inclusive extended creative day program that complements the learning of the school day. And so it's all aligned with the purpose of CNI. And with that being said, I'm going to turn it over to Chuck.
Actually, we're going to let Heather introduce the slide, but that's fine. I love to do it. So again, unfortunately, we can't be in person. Normally we have these presentations done in person. We answer questions. We have a chance to walk the building and see the building. So what we were able to do this year was we recorded this nice little video. It's about 5.5 minutes long. So I will play it real quick, if that's okay with everybody. Tell me no right now. Okay. So I'm going to click on this and we'll hopefully the audio will work and everything will go off without a hitch. Hold on. Oh,
Sure.
yeah. Go ahead.
Sorry,
Yeah.
just jumping in. You may need to open another tab and paste in that URL there.
Oh my goodness. Drop it in the chat for me.
Sorry about that.
That's okay.
Yeah.
Drop it in the chat and I'll click on it.
Give me 1 second.
Thank you. See, Jen is also my tech wizard as well, just so we're clear. All right.
There you go.
Fingers crossed. Where's my audio? Jen, can you guys hear this? Because I can't.
I cannot and I'm not sure why. I wonder if it's a restriction in Zoom.
Oh man, because this is so good. All right, this worked
Chuck,
last time.
when you share your screen, you may have to click the box that says share sound for the video clip.
Okay, so I gotta go back down here. Sorry. I'm not seeing it, Jesse.
You'll have to unshare, like stop sharing,
Oh,
and then
okay.
when you reshare, you'll be able to check a box in the bottom left.
Thank you. See, this, you're so smart. Okay. This is why I have a lot of help, ladies and gentlemen. All right, so then I'm going to go there. Just click on advanced. Give me 1 second. Computer audio, video, share. Jeez, this is not working. We may have a technical issue here. Unless someone else can share it, I'm not going to be able to make this work because it's not working at the moment, even when I did what you told me to do.
So what we can do, maybe if families, if you can copy and paste it and just share it, and you can just save it to a place where you can watch it later. Maybe what we can do is just answer some of the questions, and we'll be able to share the link to the video so that you can watch it over and over again if you like.
Yeah, I apologize. Sorry about that. Okay, let's do some questions.
Chuck, before we go back to questions, there were 2 more slides about the enrollment and lottery process. Would you like me to talk about that, or do you just want to answer the questions in the chat?
Folks can read it and then we can answer questions about it at the end. Okay.
The lottery process?
Yep.
Right.
All right, I'm going to present to you CMI proud, hashtag CMI proud colleagues, some questions that have come in, and I thank all of our attendees for sharing these questions. So first off, if your child is in pre-K 3, will they stay in the same classes with the same teachers for pre-K 4?
Great question. I'll start with that. So this is the first year that we have done this, and the thinking was we really wanted to, as students were coming back into our building after being away for almost 18 months, we really wanted to have a balance of 3- and 4-year-olds. And what we've seen so far has been very promising in that students are learning from each other. Also with our thinking for next year is possibly having those students who are those 3-year-olds stay in the room because they've already developed relationships with those teachers, and it would be a nice continuum so they kind of know the routines and are familiar with the teacher. Having said that, that is not definitive, but that's our current thinking right now. We'll have to see how many of our students are moving on because we do want to create balanced classrooms.
Thanks, Nampa. We have another pre-K question. I think we answered most of it. Someone had a question about outdoor time for pre-K, and we did address that. What about PE classes?
Sure. Students in pre-K, they have PE once a week. That's in addition to the 2 30-minute recesses each day. And that time is 40 or 50 minutes, those PE classes, yes.
Great. I just saw a question come in that I'm going to answer. Someone asked, what is the student-teacher ratio? And that is about 10-1 for all of our classes. Emmanuel, I have a question for you. Are there special ed resource rooms where some children spend most of their academic time?
So as an inclusive school, we have a resource room, but students do not spend all their time in the resource room. They spend like 2 or 1 hour, you know, as the IP team and the parents determine. So we have the resource room along the special education continuum, but 90% of the time, the student will be in the classroom with their peers.
Thank you. We had a bunch of questions come in about our after school and our before school program. So let's address those. We did talk about how some of the activities are not happening right now because of COVID protocols. So what do we expect or hope to be happening next year?
I can start with that. So right now we're being extra cautious about keeping the cohort separate. And by cohort, I mean kindergarten is a cohort, first grade is a cohort, second grade is a cohort. When we had our previous aftercare program, we would have like a ballet class or a capoeira class that was multiple grades. And since we're not able to mix them, we are not, didn't do that this year. We'll have to kind of continue and kind of monitor what health and safety guidelines are for us mixing cohorts, which will determine what we're going to do next year. We would love to be able to go back to those offerings, but safety continues to be our kind of top priority with those aftercare classes.
Thank you. One of the other questions we had was about whether there is our after school program on Wednesday. And I think I can answer that. We have our enrichment program after students are dismissed a little after noon. And then we do have after school on Wednesday that starts at 3:30 or 4, depending on the grade level. We had other questions about after school. One was, do we have any interscholastic sports for middle schoolers?
So we did before COVID. Right now, we do not.
And is that something that we are hoping to bring back once we get past the pandemic?
Absolutely.
I think we had a basketball team, an amazing basketball team, right, Lorna?
Yes, yes, and cheerleading squad.
Oh, yeah. We had a wonderful cheerleading squad. Somebody asked whether after school program is available for all students who want it. And I know that there is for creative clubs. Sometimes we have a lottery for that, but for after school, in normal times, we don't. Heather, do you have any more information about this?
You're on mute, Heather.
I figured that out as soon as I started talking and my computer popped up and says you're on mute. Regarding the before and after care, the aftercare we currently offer every day. It is available to students. During the first semester, due to COVID protocols and staffing, we had a lottery for the aftercare spots. This semester, we are able to accommodate anybody who would like aftercare. All families are being accommodated. Prior to the pandemic, there was a spot open for anybody who needed it for aftercare. The creative clubs are like an extension of aftercare, and those, depending on the activity and the demand, do have limits. I see in the chat a lot of questions about how much aftercare costs. As the director of operations, it's usually, although it's not specifically in my wheelhouse, it's definitely part of the operations team. So I will try to answer these questions. Aftercare, there is a fee, but the fee depends on multiple factors. One of the factors on how much it costs is how many children you have involved in aftercare. Another factor is whether or not the family qualifies for free or reduced lunch, because it's on a sliding scale. And currently this year for middle school students, aftercare is definitely subsidized or free. Aftercare, if you do not qualify for free or reduced lunch and you only have one child, you participate each month as an all or nothing, so you pay a flat fee. It's roughly between $300 and $350 for the last few years per month. Again, there's flexibility. The price is set every school year. So what we are currently doing does not necessarily mean it'll continue to next year. So that's kind of the general questions I saw about the aftercare that were very much technical operation questions.
Heather, who teaches and conducts the aftercare activities?
Great question. So we actually run our aftercare program in-house. So a lot of the times it's the actual teachers, teaching assistants, dedicated aides that continue all day long and work in aftercare as well. So it's a familiar face. So some of our teachers have been teaching aftercare for years.
Thank you. Can I stick with you and throw you a COVID protocol question?
Absolutely. It's my favorite topic.
If a pre-K student tests positive for COVID, what is expected in terms of quarantine, further testing, and education continuity? Great.
So let me answer the education continuity question. If a student is excluded from school due to COVID protocols, we actually have a short-term, what we call distance learning or remote learning plan. So it's eligible and open to every student. That also includes not just the meals, but since we always work on addressing the whole child, this year, we also offer home delivery food service if you are learning and you are excluded for a period of time. So that's the learning part. So the protocols here, one of the problems I think with the term of test to stay is DCPS has what they're calling a test to stay program that requires all children in kindergarten and below to submit a COVID test every week. We as a school, our test to stay program, test to stay at Creative Minds means any test that is conducted at school. We do not have a special requirement for preschool students to test to stay each week to be in school. We actually conduct a weekly asymptomatic or sentinel surveillance testing. Our testing is a PCR test. It's a lower nasal swab, and it is actually 100% of the student body and staff participate each week unless they've opted out. So that's how we normally test for asymptomatic. There's no additional testing for pre-K4 students who are currently not eligible for a vaccine. So if a student tests positive, they have to follow the standard protocols regardless of the grade, whether it's preschool through 8th grade. A COVID protocol currently, we just updated our guidance because we do have a test to stay program and other things. So if somebody tests positive, they have the option to not test at all. And it depends on how severe their symptoms are. They have to be excluded for school and they can return. It's very confusing the way the guidance is written. It's after so many days. So if you test positive for COVID and you have minimal or no symptoms, you can return to school without a test on the 12th day. If you have severe symptoms, you can return to school without a test on the 22nd day, so a little over 3 weeks. If you choose to do a test option, a student can return to school on day 9 with a negative antigen test. If you have mild or no symptoms, if you have severe symptoms, if you take the antigen test and it's negative, you can return on day 12. So I think that answers the how to return. We have very detailed protocols. We have something called a COVID decision tree that has been updated to include our operational test to stay program, which we operationalized this week. So everyone follows the same protocols. Hopefully that answers your question. And if not, please email the front desk and ask your specific health and related question, and I will be happy to answer it in detail for you.
Thank you, Heather. I'm going to switch over to our academic and our inclusion team for some questions about social emotional learning and wellness. Someone had a question about, and I'm looking for it here on my notes. So someone had a question about discipline and restorative approaches or practices that we have for students during this challenging time.
Sure, I'll start with that. So we implement a program called Conscious Discipline, and the whole premise behind that is like relationship building and the importance of, all students. Behaviors are a result, like behaviors are giving information and insight into how a student is feeling and how they're engaging with their community. So if a student exhibits a behavior or does something that, I'll give you an example. If they are, using unkind words when talking to a peer, the first approach is, to kind of talk to the student about, why did you say that? How are you feeling at this moment, to get an understanding of why the student made this remark. Sometimes in those conversations, we're able to kind of understand there was some frustration there. They just lashed out. Also in those opportunities, because we don't want to just quickly respond in a way without understanding why the behavior occurred. And depending on the information gathered in those conversations with students, we kind of determine what the next step or approach is to kind of, if they're in the situation again, how do we teach them what's a better choice that we can make? So it's all about using those incidents of a behavior as a learning opportunity so that we can teach them, if it happens, something similar happens again, what's a more reasonable way to respond. So that's kind of the premise behind the conscious discipline approach. Jen, was there another part of that question that I didn't answer?
There's a similar question, which is what type of assistance is provided to students who need additional social emotional support or one-on-one assistance?
Sure. So if the student, I'll kind of give two different caveats. If the student does have an individual education plan, sometimes in those plan it outlines additional supports that students have access to, whether it's a counselor, whether it's the social worker. So those might be written into the IEP. We also have a behavior coach for each of our divisions who are able to provide proactive support to all of classrooms. Sometimes that occurs with individual students, and really see the teachers in those classrooms as the first kind of line of defense to be able to support student needs if they're having behaviors. And then we kind of move up. If that support is not working, they involve, the instructional coaches, then it kind of moves to the behavior coaches. So there's kind of levels of support. We kind of start with the least restrictive first and kind of add on if those supports are not meeting the students where they are.
Thank you. I'm going to give some questions to Chuck, who hasn't gotten to speak in a while. We had a question about faculty. Somebody asking for some data, for example, time as educators, their certifications, retention rate, race and gender demographics, if that's something we can address.
Sure. So let's start with the two really things I love to celebrate. One is our staff look like our students and come from backgrounds. We really try hard to recruit when we are hiring folks who understand that and are committed to equity and committed to diversity and to equality. We talk about it a lot too. It's all over the school, all over our mission statement, as you saw. So that's who we attract to come work here. The other really good piece of good news is last year, 97% of the staff we invited to come back came back. There is unheard of in any school, anywhere, at any time, pandemic or not. I think a lot of that is because we focus on community, we talk about community, we took very good care of our students' families, and we try to take good care of our staff while they're away. So for example, Heather mentioned we deliver lunches if a student has to be quarantined. Well, during the pandemic, we delivered 182,100 free meals to our families in our community. Some of those were staff members, some of those were just friends of students who were enrolled. We didn't limit it. What we do is we try to have a very holistic approach to our community as well. All of our teachers have degrees and are certified, and what we're trying to do, this is part of our strategic plan that I mentioned at the outset, is we're trying to develop clear career ladders. So if we have a dedicated aide who's really fantastic with the one student they're assigned to, but they want to expand the number of kids they work for, we might talk to them how to become a teaching assistant. So they could be the number 2 in the class and support multiple kids in those small group learning sessions or in those centers. If we have some teaching assistants that are really excited about becoming a more teacher, we will help them develop a plan to become a teacher. We also provide educational assistance to our staff. We have loan forgiveness programs. We can help people pay for their education. So it really has to be holistic when you're looking at who you're bringing into the school and working with our kiddos. I'm particularly proud of that. I don't have the exact numbers in front of me. I know we reported them to the Public Charter School Board and to the Office of the State Superintendent for Education. So they're publicly available. And I know the citywide retention rate report just came out from the Office of the State Superintendent. And I think the overall retention rate for the city was 70 something percent, low 70s, 72, 73, which is higher than typical. So that's, I think, good news. But again, I'm really proud of my team and these directors here of taking good care of their teams, that our retention rate last year was well over 90%.
Thanks, Chuck. We had one of our participants pose a question that's a little more philosophical, and a question I really like. So this one's for you too. She says that she's struggling to find a school with strong math, science focus, and language focus. And her question is it possible for kids to be good in STEM subjects and language too?
It's absolutely possible for kids to be good at all of those things. We certainly believe that. That's the beauty of having this grouping that we're talking about, and that the groupings are fluid and based on data. So if you have a child that might be reading above grade level, let's just talk about literacy for a minute. They might be grouped with other students who are reading above grade level and give them more challenging tests. Or alternatively, they might be helping kind of reading coach with a group that is struggling a little bit, because sometimes kids learn really well from other kids. But the teachers have a lot of creativity and control in their classrooms. They get a ton of support from their directors. We have instructional coaches at every level. And then we've got this full-time student wellness team and all the related service providers in-house, which is pretty unique for a school too, where we can address needs as they pop up. You heard Lorna talk a little bit about the middle school and how they have the advisories. And in those advisories, and especially on Wednesday, students can go work with the teacher. So if they're interested in doing some advanced level science, they can go talk to Dorothy and do some really cool science with Dorothy. Our after school programming was an area we also provided a lot of really interesting opportunities for kids pre-pandemic. We had a robotics club that we hosted we actually hosted the first virtual robotics club competition 2 years ago, which was a parent-led program, but our kids really enjoyed that. So we tried to build opportunities around for kids, but 100% kids can and do both, and can and do both well. But I also deeply respect the fact that some just might be amazing language learners, and that's their thing. And math is not as much fun for them, and they don't excel, say, in it as much. They're as equally important in our school as someone who is good at everything or someone who needs supports across the board.
Thanks, Chuck. You ready for a question that sort of goes back to our mission statement a little bit?
I love it.
All right, so how do we balance meeting students where they are with challenging them to make sure they are competitive outside school?
That's exactly why we built the school and why we're all working here, is to build what we call the CMI graduate profile. So when we did the strategic plan, and I believe there's access to it publicly. If not, we will make it available, or at least highlights from it. But it really does say, when you graduate from CMI, these are the skills you're going to have. And they're in 4 categories. And what we've seen, because we actually have kids come back all the time from the high schools they've gone to. We just had a pair of kids. I was talking to Margaret, who's on the call here with us today. She said a couple girls who went to Bishop Carroll High School, which is near here, a private school, want to come back and help out here because they love Creative Minds so much. And they're doing so well at Bishop Carroll. We send kids to pretty much the wide spectrum of private schools and public schools, high schools. When they graduate from here, our kids do really well at Basis, KIPP. They do well at E.L. Haynes, Cap City. Washington Latin takes a bunch of our kids. DC International gets a bunch of our kids too. And they really seem to excel. It's that self-agency, I think, that Lorna was talking about. And it is this cyclical approach to education. It's constantly reinforcing the process. It's constantly empowering inquiry-based learning and also speaking about what you learn, because that's as important as internalizing it, but being able to express it. And so all students should be globally aware and independently minded. And that's really what our mission statement says. And that's why we're also an inclusion school.
Thanks. Here's a question. I'm not sure who it's for, but I bet many of you would actually be able to answer it. Do we have points of collaboration with other schools that use the international curriculum? Do we feed into DCI? Do you have points of collaboration around other issues such as social emotional principles?
Sure, I can start. So with the international curriculum, I have had some opportunities to collaborate with other leaders at those schools. A couple of the challenges that presents is that with the international is the time zone, and trying to collaborate with schools whose time zones are a little bit different than ours. But then also just there's with our access to the website with the curriculum, there's like web pages and where teachers post from around the world. So we have access to that. I also have had the opportunity to accredit some of the schools, so I have opportunities to visit some of the schools pre-COVID, and where I'm able to bring back to our school things that we've seen in other schools. And we actually just were invited to partner with, to join this partnership with our international early years curriculum, where there will be more opportunities for us to connect with schools that currently use that curriculum. Your other question around with social emotional collaboration with other schools. We have not done a lot with that, honestly, in the past year. We have had trainers from Conscious Discipline come to offer support to our teachers, and that's something ongoing. We were, right before we went into COVID, we were ready to hit the ground running with Conscious Discipline, and we've kind of sparked that while we were virtual, but then really with the start of this school year, got back into doing that because that relationship building really is able to happen better in person. But we do have training with that as well.
Thanks, Nyamko. We have a couple of more academic questions. One of them was about how long Spanish classes are for 5th to 8th graders. And I know we answered that in the slide, so I'm going to ask that participant if you have any other questions about Spanish classes, to please drop them in the chat. One person asked, how much time does each international curriculum unit take? Is it over the course of, say, a week or a month?
Sure, I can take that. One, it depends on the age of the students, and then also the topic. Some topics, each grade starts with a brainwaves unit when they kick off the year, and that's like all about the brain. So that unit is pretty short. It's only about 2 weeks. Some of the other units, they kind of range from 4 to 8 weeks, depending on what the topic is.
Other questions, Jen?
Oh, sorry, I was on mute.
I figured, I just didn't want to call you out.
Thank you. Heather, you might be able to answer this. Do you have any thoughts about transportation for a student who lives in Ward 7 or 8?
Currently, students who receive OSSI transportation are those who are students who receive services and a very specific set of services that require it. Other transportation is in DC. Any student who attends a DC public or DC public charter school is eligible for a free DC One card or a Kids Ride Free card. So they can take the Metro bus or the Metro train for free to and from school.
Thank you. Yep, thank you. So we have 2 more questions left. One of them I can answer. Somebody asked whether there is a way for our prospective families to talk to current families. And I'm going to make a note of that and connect with our Creative Families Association about that and get back to the person who answered that question. There was a follow-up question about language for middle school. Do students become proficient with that 1 hour a day, 4 days a week schedule for language classes?
So the goal of Spanish is not an immersion type process, but what we want to do is expose the child or the students from 5th grade to 8th grade in that selective language class. And then from that time on, when they go to high school, some of our students have tested out of Spanish 101 and they've come back to tell us, Ms. Lorna, I've tested out of Spanish 101. So it's sort of like a gradual learning curve. And so we want to make sure that they get the exposure and the depth during the school time from 5th grade to 8th grade. And then when they go to high school, be able to push past it. And then again, what Nyanka says is that it's not just about the language, it's about the culture. It's about the world exposure, to Chuck's point about being globally minded. So it's kind of inclusive, but a lot of our students do test out of Spanish 101 and Mandarin 101.
Thanks, Lorna. You might also be able to answer this question, which is there a high school that Creative Mind feeds into, or do families participate in the lottery when they apply to high school?
So
go ahead, Lorna.
We don't feed into a high school. Our students do participate in the DC lottery. We just finished that process, and the counselors and myself have just finished filling out like tons and tons of recommendations to get the schools and the children in the schools that they want to go to, but we don't have a feeder school. And I'm gonna let Chuck finish that answer.
Yeah, currently we don't have a high school as part of our programming. We also don't have a sort of an arrangement like a lot of the immersion schools have with DCI. That being said, we have a counselor, a full-time counselor who her job is to help kids pick the right high schools. That's Tara. She's not with us today, but that's who Lorna was referring to. She hosts high school fairs on campus, well, virtually, but typically they're on campus. We'll help kids visit schools. We'll help families think about private versus public, navigate the DC lottery. So that's the current supports that we're doing. My board and I are really interested in that very question. We don't have a solid answer, sort of what the solution is, but we're going to be engaging probably some consulting support to think about, should we at a high school, should we try to negotiate a deal with a high school that our kids automatically get a seat into, so there's no need for a lottery? Or is it better to just really continue to build a fantastic school and place our kids all over the city in all sorts of different environments to sort of spread the wealth? So we're looking into that right now, but there isn't sort of an easy fix to it at the moment, is what I would say.
Thanks, Chuck. I think we have answered all the questions. Lorna, someone is asking whether I can share your email address.
Yes, that's not a problem at all.
I'm going to drop that into the chat. If anyone has any final questions, please go ahead and drop them into the chat.
Jen, I see a question in there. Are there certain ways you're working to improve the school to reach tier 1 status? And I'm happy to kind of start with that. We are a public school, and any student who wants to come to our school is welcome to come to our school. And so we have a wide range of abilities that come to our school. And with that, we meet students where they are. We appreciate the diversity that our school brings. And we are always looking to move students, and our focus is on growth. When we see growth happening with students, that feels good to us. And so we look at it from a space of growth. We want all students to continue to grow. So, we see that tier 1, and we take it I don't want to say with a grain of salt. I think that's one piece of the puzzle, but we also want to ensure that we're continuing to grow students no matter where they are.
Let me take sort of a high level citywide approach to tier 1, because a lot of what Creative Minds tries to do is be part of those citywide conversations with school leaders and build those close relationships. And really right now, tier 1 there is no tiering going on at all. The Office of the State Superintendent, as well as the Public Charter School Board, because of the pandemic, the only reliable data according to them is from 2018, 2019. So we're already looking 3 years ago. And as a result of that, they're not going to do tiers anymore. They're not going to do the stars anymore that they used to do. They will still do school report cards, but those are basic demographic information, what the offerings are, staff qualifications and demographics, those kind of things are all still available. I will say I've been having a lot of conversations with the executive director of the Public Charter School Board and her team. They are revisiting what they call the PMF. It's called the Performance Management Framework, which is how they judge schools. Every school has their own mission, has their own goals as part of their charter contract. We were just approved for 5 more years of operation with 0 conditions. We were the only school that went through that approval process this past year without any conditions. We're definitely feeling really good about the direction that the school is headed, and Nyamka hit the nail on the head, and this is where the conversations are going. This is now about growth. This is not about a single one point in time snapshot in May, where if a kid didn't get breakfast in the morning, they might not be able to sit still for 3 hours and take an assessment. But if we get a kid who's 2 grade levels behind and we move them a grade and a half forward, even if they're not at the grade level their age tells them to be, we're really, really proud of that, because that's growth. That's where the world is right now when it comes to schools. a lot, it's important to remember our kindergarten students, this is their first time in school. They haven't been in school in person for 2 years. Our third graders, last time they were in school in person before this year was first grade. So we're doing a lot of that SEL catch up, a lot of that academic catch up. And that's why I think it's very appropriate that from the mayor's office on down, we're talking about growth measurements going forward. And I think that's really why we all entered education. It wasn't to say my kid is the, got the highest test score of all time. But that's my personal philosophy. Take it or leave it. But I do think that's the way everything is trending at this point. We're moving away from no excuses. We're moving to how do we make these kids grow and be awesome people.
So I'm going to put out a last call for questions. I'm not seeing any in the chat. We thank everybody for joining us this morning on this beautiful Saturday morning. I'm going to turn it back to Chuck for any closing comments.
Well, Heather, how about if you just sort of describe the lottery process and the slide that's up, number 39 right now, just so folks know what needs to happen and what the timeline is, so we can make sure folks have good information.
Sure. Can you share your screen, please?
I will. Sorry, I forgot we had that video thing. Hold on 1 second.
So as a school, we participate in the My School DC lottery process. So the application for our school or for any school below 8th grade closes on March 1st. You put your name in the lottery and you rank your schools that you'd like. If you have questions about the lottery process, you can call the school or you can reach out to My School DC and they will help you answer them. And typically, how many spots are available in the lottery? It just depends. So for like our preschool, because everyone is new, we have about 60 spaces available. In the other grades, it really depends on the year and the grade. Sometimes it varies between 1 spot. Sometimes it's like 10 seats that are available. We do follow all the My School DC rules. So please contact the front desk for those types of questions. I also saw in the chat if there's an opportunity to tour the school. We made the virtual video so anybody can look at it. If you are offered a matched spot with My School through My School DC in April, or if you're offered a spot on the wait list, we will actually accommodate you to take an in-person tour. Currently, right now, we do not have tours open for anybody who would just like to check out the school due to our COVID protocols. But we do, when people are matched or have an active waitlist offer, we do have a program in place where our registrar will be happy to give you a tour in person so you can look at the school before you decide if you really want to enroll. Yes, we do offer through the My School DC lottery, we have 3 preferences that we offer. The first preference is a sibling attended preference. The second one is a staff preference, so students of staff. And the third one is a sibling offered preference. The sibling attending preference is for students who are currently enrolled and actively attending. Somebody asked how many of the pre-K spots go to sibling preference of sibling attending. It depends on the year. It can be anywhere from about 10 as high to about 20 students. Right now in the lottery, from approving the sibling preferences, it looks like we're sitting at about 15 or 16 kids, but that's across all grades, not just pre-K. The staff members, we have roughly in the entire school, and not every year, just total in a given year, we have roughly about 10 children that belong to staff members that attend the school. Through the lottery process, usually it's 1 to 2 students a year that will come in that way. And the sibling offered preference, which is probably where most people see it, and how the sibling offered preference works is, say you have multiple children and they're both on the wait list for Creative Minds. Say child number 1 in pre-K is at spot number 2 and eventually becomes spot number 1, and we offer the spot. And child number 2 may be in 3rd grade and they are 150 on the wait list. As soon as we make the wait list offer to your child in pre-K, the child in 3rd grade would automatically pop to the top of the list. We do our best when we make wait list offers to make sure that we offer spots, if we can, to all siblings at one time. So this way you're not waiting and having your child in 3rd grade sit at number 1 for like 3 weeks waiting for a spot to open in 3rd grade. We really do our best to accommodate as much as we can. Last year, we were able to make all sibling waitlist offers at the same time. So hopefully that answers your question about the lottery preferences. And I think that's about it. With that, unless people have more questions about the lottery process, please, I will turn it back over to Chuck.
All right, last call for questions. Drop them in the chat. I will speak slowly and thank everybody, especially my amazing team who are here on a Saturday morning and already put in 12, 14-hour days, 5 days a week. They lead with their hearts and they love what they do and they take beautiful care of each other and the kids. So it is a privilege and an honor to be head of this school. We really want you to come to see Creative Minds. We think it's a great school. We think it's a beautiful experience for kids. So feel free, if you have questions after this, to reach out to me or anybody on this call. And thank you guys. Thank you. Have a wonderful day. Enjoy the nice weather before it gets cold tomorrow.